When a venture capitalist invests in a startup, they're investing in more than just a company. A strong founder market fit is vital, and few understand that better than today's guest. As a serial entrepreneur, he's focused his attention on leadership and has broken the mold for what makes a successful CEO. Join us in today's conversation with Jeron Paul, founder and CEO of Spiff, and investor Gavin Christensen, as we bring you both sides of a perfect pitch. Perfect Pitch is a podcast from Kickstart that reveals the minds of both investors and entrepreneurs throughout a startup's journey. I'm your host, Karen Zelnick, and I'm excited to introduce everyone to today's guests. Jaron, I'm going to go through a few of your bio points. So you're a serial entrepreneur. You founded 4 companies before founding Spiff, which is a Utah-based SaaS startup. You were previously a venture capitalist where you invested over $60 million in software startups. And today you're an angel or secondary investor in over a dozen companies. You love Shakespeare, old period romance, and hope to someday write a sci-fi or a fantasy story. And Gavin's a big fantasy and sci-fi reader himself. So, it's no wonder that the two of you get along really well. And is there anything else that we should know about you or that you'd like our listeners to know?
Just the fact that I have a lot of dirt on Gavin. So we'll have to circle back around to that one.
Perfect. Gavin, you're not nervous at all. It's fine. Yeah. And it's always good to have you back on the show. And we'll have a link to your bio in our show notes. And you and Jaron knew each other long before Kickstart, as I've already hinted at. So tell us a little bit about your early relationship and how you two know each other.
Well, we go way back. And by the way, I'm not nervous about Jaron having dirt on me because I don't think anyone has the ability to embarrass myself like myself. So I'm not intimidated by others' ability to do so. So we go back to BYU. We're both econ majors. I think it's fair to say, Jaron, we were kind of similar in that we were people who were interested in a broad set of things, but we're doing econ because of the rigor and what it could do for us career-wise. So we spent a lot of time in the econ lab trying to keep up with all the PhD types who were owning econometrics and other things. Anyway, that's how we first met. Jaron went to Monitor, which is a consulting firm in Boston, and helped recruit me there, including my first round of interviewing with consulting firms and striking out and then trying again and getting in, that's sort of the pattern of my life, is often trying for something, failing, and then coming back and doing it and getting it the next time, or maybe getting something different the next time. That's sort of the pattern in my life.
Mine's kind of the opposite of that experience. Right, Gavin?
Yeah, just getting in.
Yeah, just generally succeeding the first time.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. Anyway, so that's a lot of how we knew each other. Was he went to Monitor, I went to Monitor. He went to VSpring, I went to VSpring. He went to business school, I kind of took over his spot. Then he came back from B school, took my spot, I went to B school. And then we ended up working together at VSpring, and we ended up talking to Jaron about possibly joining Kickstart a few different times over the years, and him opting for the entrepreneurial route. So I would say it's been one of the really fun things in my career to work with Jaron specifically in a bunch of different capacities. Before we move on, Kez, I should ask you, as we kick off the season, what have you been up to? Is there something you're reading that you want to tell us about, or what does the audience not know about you?
I feel like there's a lot they don't know about me, but I always feel like I never know what is interesting to say on this. But as far as what I'm reading, I actually really enjoy reading things about culture and about cultivating talent. And I'm currently reading Coactive, which is a leadership and coaching. They have a coactive coaching sort of workbook. So I'm learning how to have good conversations and coach, and how to be a coach as a manager. And it's really fascinating to me.
Sounds like one I need to add to my list.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. So, everyone should add it to the list, I was going to say. But Jaron, to start, tell our listeners a little bit about Spiff.
I kind of have various levels of detail depending on how into our particular industry the person is that I'm talking to. For this conversation, I'll go to level 1, which is just kind of what I would tell my grandma when she asked me what I'm doing. And basically what I tell my grandma is, hey, there's a lot of folks that get sales commissions out there, and it turns out that managing that process and calculating the right numbers for that process is actually much more complicated than you would think. And so we build the software that does that allows people and companies to scale the process of giving incentive compensation to folks at their companies.
It's amazing that until this point, it was basically just done on a spreadsheet. And you'd think that that would have been automated sooner, but we needed you to come along and do it.
Yeah. Well, in fact, one of my co-founders and I, who have started multiple companies together, we often joke that if you show us a really complicated spreadsheet that runs a business critical process, we'll show you a startup idea. I still think the unbundling of Excel is really, really rich grounds for other entrepreneurs out there, especially if you like fintech.
And Microsoft is like, stop, don't do it.
It's interesting. Excel is such a Swiss Army knife that it's not really trying to compete with, a pure play commission management software platform.
Somehow I feel like they're not feeling that threatened these days.
Yeah.
I feel like they're doing okay over there.
They're doing fine. Yeah. So, Jaron, getting back to Spiff, it wasn't your first startup. And with other companies under your belt, what was different about your experience founding Spiff?
Most of my previous startups were on the scale of completely bootstrapped to really heavily venture financed, were significantly far further towards the completely bootstrapped end of the spectrum. I think in the last deal that I did with Kickstart and Gavin, particularly, I think we ended up raising about $2.2 million, give or take. About 300 to 400K of that, maybe even as high as 500K of that was from the management team. And so when you looked at really at net outside capital, sub $2 million. And then the company I started before that was essentially friends and family money. And I think it totaled something like 70K of investment. The company I started before that was essentially zero or close to, it was like whatever I could personally invest. And so I think for those reasons, we wanted to do something very different with Spiff. We wanted to explore creating a truly generational company. And to do that, we also felt like this space was going to heat up very quickly. I'd kind of seen that with some of the other deals I had done in the past. We felt like this one was going to progress rapidly towards a tipping point, and then it would become kind of a key part of the sales and finance tech stacks. And so we wanted to make sure we were at the forefront of that. And we felt like the best way to do that was to raise a significant amount of venture capital fairly quickly. And so that's what we did. And so I think that's probably the single biggest thing.
And what did that do for you, or what did that open up for you as far as a founder? And I would love to know a few lessons learned or how that changed your approach from the onset.
It definitely changed my approach in terms of team building and just the overall growth of the company. I would say we eclipsed CapShare's total revenues when we sold CapShare in, I want to say definitely under 2 years. It could have been close to like a year and a half. So we completely blew past my last company's total revenue amount at the time we sold the company within like a year and a half of Spiff. So just a much, much faster ramp. In terms of lessons learned, I've just learned a ton being a third time or fourth time CEO and a second time software CEO around how we wanted to build the software and how we wanted to avoid some of the early problems we had with my last company. And so I think we've been a lot smarter around how we built the software for what's called extensibility so that we can build on top of that software more easily. It's much easier to make changes to the software this time around for Spiff than it was for CapShare. One thing, though, that I think I kind of traded a little was Gavin will often call this founder market fit. I had very, very deep founder market fit at CapShare and less so, I would say, with Spiff. So it's been fun to see the pros and cons of those two approaches. I was never a sales compensation consultant for multiple years before joining Spiff. Now, I had certainly faced the problem, but I didn't work for ZS or the Alexander Group or Aon or one of these very large sales consulting practices out there. And so I didn't bring that level of founder market fit this time around.
As I think about lessons learned from my side, and again, working with Jaron, I think one of the things we did well as he approached Spiff, and it was a no-brainer for us to fund Jaron and work with him. We tried to work with Jaron to make sure that he was well-funded, but he wasn't feeling pressure to immediately start hitting revenue KPIs versus finding product market fit. I mean, Spiff's had explosive growth over the last several years, but there was several months without revenue that I think were actually among the most critical in the history of the company to get things really figured out and We brought in a great firm on the Series A pretty early, but we didn't do that until Jaron and the team had really figured some things out. So Jaron and his team has done so much right at Spiff, but specifically, I think we worked together to do that period well so that you were ready for the big money when it came. And sometimes the time and lack of pressure is valuable to go slow, get it right, then go fast. That's one of my recollections of like, hey, I'm really glad we did that because it's been a blur since and you guys have solved problem after problem. But you had this core of like, this is valuable to this customer.
And Gavin, I would be interested in going a little bit deeper on that. Like, how would you advise founders on what they need to do within that time period? And how do they know when they're ready and they've really nailed it and they're ready to take on, like you said, some big money?
It varies for every company. The mistake is often getting some customer traction and saying, oh, that's product market fit. Let's start really scaling up, go to market, as opposed to iterating and say, do we have enough here? And one of the things that Spiff had to figure out is this is a big change for customers to onboard, many times going from a very complicated spreadsheet that kind of works to really sophisticated software, but figuring out, okay, how much services are involved? Because every set of investors you bring on, there's less tolerance for ambiguity and more pressure to hit KPIs that justify their investment, which means you kind of go with what you have. And that's why I say being pre-seed seed is a special time because you have investors who are kind of like, let's just find out what works. We're on a search. No Series A investor wants to be on a search. They want to be, hurtling towards destination. That's what I would say is just that's the general concept. Anyway, I don't know if you'd agree with that, Jaron, but.
Yeah, completely. I was thinking about how Tesla gets criticized sometimes for the fact that when you look at its cars, that the doors don't line up perfectly. And there's these things called tolerances in building cars. And as you progress from a seed to a C, the tolerances just need to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And so like Gavin said, you just got to be hurtling towards a destination and more have your unit economics metrics just dialed in.
And I think that's one of the things that many companies, SaaS companies, struggle with is they break through these great revenue milestones, maybe 5-7 million ARR, but then some stall out because they didn't quite have enough product market fit going for them. And Spiff has really done a great job of just breaking through those milestones, need to roll.
Yeah, I think that's a really important takeaway for those that are listening. And Gavin, there are obviously positives and negatives to being a repeat founder like Jaron is. And it's probably rare that the founder has great founder market fit. So I'd love your perspective on the pitfalls and benefits of repeat founders, and then how important is that founder market fit?
So first on the founder market fit or founder opportunity fit is we ask ourselves, why is this person the one that will solve this challenging and intractable problem? Because of not just Jaron, but the team that came together around this, the timing of the problem, the types of problems they'd executed in the past. We're like, well, why not this team? If not them, then who is going to nail this? And maybe the founder opportunity fit part is just the broader opportunity in Jaron's vision for giving powerful data science and execution automation tools to the business user. And so I knew this played into a bigger Jaron passion of where he wanted to go. The founders that really build something special, they're motivated by a host of things, but especially solving the problem. And that's in the long form, like solving it over 15 years because the problem changes and gets more complicated. So we love serial entrepreneurs that have had success and failure because they tend to take great lessons from both. I don't think Jaron's had any huge failures, but he's had companies where he's like, hey, that could have been bigger. I wish that I'd done that different. And he's naturally a very self-aware person that's constantly iterating, what am I learning? What am I learning? And so some of our biggest failures have been with serial entrepreneurs because they have a playbook that they just jam through on a different kind of business. But anytime we can back a serial entrepreneur, we get excited about it because it does create the opportunity of a company that learns fast and can beat competitors by a lot.
And Jaron, how did you make sure you weren't one of those founders that Gavin mentioned that just kind of applied the same thing, just add water and stir to every one of your startups? Like, how do you make sure you have the self-awareness, and what would you advise other founders on to make sure that they learn from their lessons?
I think as a CEO, if you're not fairly obsessed, and as a founder, if you're not fairly obsessed about getting to the truth about yourself, the problem you're facing, information about the company in general, you're going to fail. I think I spend quite a bit of time trying to think about how do I get to the truth? Because there's so many competing incentives for, especially for founders to have a selection bias in what information they think about and they focus on. And frankly, as the company gets larger, you have to be very careful to create a culture where you're going to get the hard truths said to you. Or if they can't say it directly to you, then you need to create some channels where that information can get to you indirectly even. I think that's something I obsess actually a lot about as a CEO is how do I make sure that I'm actually hearing the truth and the hard truths that are latent within this incredible company of the wisdom of the crowd of these 250 people that are at Spiff with me.
That's amazing. And I want to get a little bit deeper, Jaron, on what you said about having a culture that lets people express their hard truths or share hard truths. Do you have 1 or 2 points on how you actually created that?
I love that question so much, but I'd love to be concise about it because, there's probably 100 ways that we've tried to do that. In many ways, I view it as like a central theme of culture building at Spiff and at any company I've ever worked at. I came out of a philosophy undergrad, so I'm a huge fan of using what's called the Socratic method and identifying truth. It's really almost requires that there be multiple perspectives at the table at the same time, ideally even opposing perspectives, because as you have these opposing perspectives, the truth will emerge more rapidly and more clearly. We don't have a checklist or even a set of core values that we hire against. We don't have hey, you're a culture fit at Spiff. We never use those words. We use the words culture add. And it's important for us because we don't want someone that fits us. We don't want another white male from Utah. That's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is someone who's going to challenge us in the right ways. It's a really wonderful metaphor, but pearls are made when an irritant gets inside a clam. And then because it's irritated over and over and over again, it forms this beautiful thing. And that's kind of similar in a culture. You need an irritant. You actually need someone who kind of bugs you sometimes, someone who's like combating you and is kind of like, gosh, dang it, do I have to think about that again? Like, you're right, we're not doing enough of that, And so I think there's just a lot we've done culturally from the outset of Spiff to try and welcome that, to put it into a lot of our culture documents. Another thing that's immediately sprang to mind was I care so much about hard truths. Obviously, it's so much more functional in a culture to have a culture where people can, to your face, tell you a hard truth. That is the absolute gold standard and what I want to strive for at any company that I'm a part of. But we care so much about hard truths that we don't want the fact that you don't feel like you could do that. I couldn't call out the CEO in that conversation, or I couldn't argue with the head of marketing right there in a public spot. And so we also do a lot of anonymous polls. And, one of the things I did very early on, which may seem silly, is we set up a hotline where people could call and express any concerns that they had about the direction of the company. We did it through email, and we did it through surveys. But I also published an ethics document where I put the email address and phone number of my boss, which is the board, right there in the document. I said, if you ever have a concern with the CEO, go directly to my boss. It's not Gavin, thank goodness for him. I actually put Sean Jacobson, one of our other board members, on there. But I'm hoping to model to them. We don't care about tattling on people. We don't care. What we want is the truth. We want whatever puts the company and moves the company forward.
Yeah, those are interesting. And Gavin, how have you seen this play out at Spiff?
I think leaders, and I think Jaron, Matt, and others at Spiff are the kind of people who admit mistakes and own them and aren't afraid of being vulnerable in that way. I think it makes it okay for other people to not be defensive and hide mistakes. We're looking for the truth or the right answer as opposed to like trying to position who's right and who's wrong. And then I think that Jaron, and this is one of the things I always say about Jaron that's been really remarkable to watch, is even from early BYU days, is someone who loves mentoring people and has always spent an inordinate amount of time helping people advance their careers for no obvious reason other than just liking to do it and kind of wanting to help people. And so I think that's a natural part of the Spiff culture where people really buy in, like, oh, like this management team cares about my career and is trying to help me be successful. So I think it's like that trust, the comfort with vulnerability that allows for a dynamic where people are actually in search of the right answer instead of a perception of themselves.
Yeah. I think we're probably going to have you back, Jaron, because Gavin touched on something that I wanted to dive into too. This time is your commitment to mentoring. But we'd like to end on a final question. And that is this. It is, what's an effective practice that you've implemented in your work or personal life that you think has had a great impact on your success?
You know, it's funny. The one that just pops out to mind, I have become a much larger reader of business books. We have several teams. We have lots of different teams at Spiff, and we very much have copied Weave and Brandon Rodman's. We don't have employees at Spiff. We have team members. We never call them employees. So we're careful about how we name teams as well. But I have a C team, which is all the C-level folks, and what we call an S team, which is the SVP and up team. And we have often picked books, almost like a S team or C team book group. That has been wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Some of the highlights of my career have been picking a book and then coming together to discuss it. Not even making it like a true book group, but just being like, hey, how does it apply to this problem that we're struggling with right now? It's been amazing to see some of the insights that it unlocks when we do that together as a team.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, Gavin, any thoughts on that?
I think that's terrific advice. I think having the context of a book that we're reviewing helps us get us out of our paradigms, our biases, and say, okay, how else can we approach this? So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I love these themes of continually learning, finding the hard truths, coming at things from multiple perspectives and building. There's so much we could talk about. But Jaron, it's been so great to have you on the podcast today. Gavin, thank you as always for your insights and all that you bring. And it's been a great discussion.
And thank you.
Thank you both. It's so fun to be here with you.
And of course, thank you for listening as we dive deep into what it takes to create the perfect pitch. If you want to learn more about our investor, Gavin Christensen from Kickstart, or our founder, Jeron Paul from Spiff, we'll have a link to the company and a longer bio in our show notes at kickstartfund.com. You can listen to more episodes of Perfect Pitch wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you like what you're learning, leave us a review or rating. We'll be back next time with more insights from entrepreneurs and the investors who fund them. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing.